Coming off of the program's first NCAA tournament appearance in 30 years, UMass fans had a lot to be excited about heading into the 92-93 campaign. Returning senior leaders Tony Barbee and Harper Williams, sensational sophomore big man Lou Rowe, a top 20 national preseason ranking, and a brand new building awaiting the Minutemen in mid-season. UMass teams had called the Curry-Hicks Cage home since the winter of 1932. But despite several renovations, the Cage was no longer an adequate home for a nationally competitive Division I program.
The demand was certainly there for a new building. Plans had been on the table for some sort of new building for decades, and nothing had really ever moved on it.
Coach Cal, you'd see the seats on the UMass basketball bench that would say property of UMass Biology Department. And he was just, this was completely unacceptable. In his office, there were rotary dial phones. He just had a sense of where UMass could be was so much farther along than where it was. And he wasn't going to accept anything less than getting there. And part of that was the Mullins Center.
You can't be a top 10 program in a high school gym. It wasn't going to happen. And the school here made a commitment. Again, it was the administration, it was the state that made a commitment that, we see that this program can be a national program.
Calipari got the attention of the major leaders in Massachusetts, and that helped with the appropriations. The real reason we got the Mullins Center built was because of Calipari's records.
The Cage is college basketball. That's really where you should be playing college games, but because of the recruiting and the revenue from a bigger building, you're forced to move into a 10 or 20,000 seat arena to impress people.
I'll embrace the Mullins Center with my good right arm, but don't grieve if I leave that left arm around the way to the grand old lady Curry-Hicks Cage, because there have been just so many good memories.
With construction on the Mullins Center scheduled to be completed in January, Coach Cal's Minutemen began the season with a solid 11-4 record and carried a 5-game winning streak into the final game at the Cage. January 31st, 1993, a nationally televised battle against Southwestern Louisiana, a team that had won an NCAA tournament game the previous season.
It was a made-for-TV event. The Rage in the Cage meets the Ragin' Cajuns. The timing was a little awkward. You figure if you're opening a brand new arena, you would tend to want to do that at the beginning of a season. Didn't happen that way.
Talk about an unbelievable night. Obviously, we couldn't lose that game, leaving the Cage on the last night. The place was a jam-packed house. The students were beating the doors down to get in.
Me and about 15 of my friends were standing outside the Cage before the game, it was a million people out there. And I remember the side door was open, and Coach Cal, the locker rooms were right there. So Coach Cal kind of came out and asked one of the police officers, like, what's going on out there? Oh, it's just, guys, we wait for them to come in. I'm not sure about these guys. And all of a sudden, he just said to all of us, it was like 30 guys, he goes, guys, come on in. And one by one, we just walked in the door. It was so loud in there, and people talking to you and sweating. You felt like you were going to pass out.
Everybody wanted to be at that game, and we were there for hours. And by the time the game started, we had no voices left from being outside in a freezing cold night, chanting and singing the whole time. We had nothing left.
It was just a fantastic way to close that building, for us to come out with a W, the fanfare, the national television audience. That was the way the Cage should have ended. It should have been stopped on that particular night against the Raging Cajuns.
The Cage is going to be here another 60 years. Don't screw it up and mess up this floor, the backboard, the rims, or anything.
UMass won the game by 10. 6 days later, ready or not, the program played its first game at the Mullins Center.
Probably a few code violations still existed at that time, but hey, the place had a roof and 4 walls and 9,500 seats, and most of the amenities were in place. Let's go.
Playing West Virginia, the first game in this building, and the commodes overflowed. They opened the building too soon, so I guess there were lines, they couldn't use bathrooms, and we end up playing awful and winning the game.
That will put the exclamation point on the first win for UMass at their new Mullins Center.
UMass defeated the Mountaineers by 5 in overtime, then went on to win their second straight Atlantic 10 regular season and tournament title, defeating the rival Temple Owls by 8 in a championship game that was played on the brand new home floor. For the second year in a row, the Minutemen received a number 3 seed in the NCAA East region and were sent to the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. UMass squeaked by Penn in the first round, defeating the Quakers 54-50. But 2 days later, Coach Cal's team was upset by 6th-seeded Virginia by 15 points, and the season ended with a record of 24-7. Looking back at 92-93, it was the end of the Cage era that stands out most.
That ended a great run, but it was clear that UMass had outgrown that facility. but not without some loss, because that was a magical place, the Cage.
They could never have been what they became had they remained at Curry Hicks. I think we all understand that. That doesn't mean I can't have a soft spot for Curry Hicks Cage, because those of us from the 70s, we have fond memories. But Mullins Center had to be built, and we're glad that it's there.
With the new facility now in full effect and Lou Rose set to return for his junior season, things looked promising for UMass moving forward. Then, coinciding with the arrival of a lanky big man who had been overlooked by some bigger programs, a landmark game the next November would bring the Minutemen to a whole new level.